All right, so that brings me up to the next step of my process, which is working out the size of the canvas. I usually work out the size of the canvas depending on the size of the person's head. I place a lot of emphasis on trying to paint a realistic size. I don't like to paint my faces too big or too small, because what I find is it's hard to get a likeness. It's easier for me to get a likeness when I'm doing it life size. So how do I do that? I've already measured Poppy's head, and it's 13.5 centimeters. So I've got that in my mind. I will do it around about life size or slightly smaller, but I won't go larger and I won't go too small. It's amazing, we can still recognize a human face from miles away in a crowd. We can also recognize human faces, and in a photograph that's, the face might be half the size of my nail. So we're very, as human beings, we're very good at recognizing other human beings or human beings' faces. So what I like to do is I like to work out the size of my overall painting via the size of the face. So what I've done in this case is I've used, this is just an A4 photo. I've measured the length of each side of this A4 photo. In this case, from this point to this point is 28 centimeters. From this point to this point is 18 centimeters. Now, when I measured Poppy's face in this reference material, it measured 4 centimeters. In my head, I would like that to be around about that so let's say 10 centimeters or 13 centimeters mark. Now 10 centimeters is around about 4 inches or thereabouts. So instead of doing a large mathematical calculation, what I decided to do in this particular case is just convert these centimeters into inches. So that will be the size of my canvas. We still measure our canvases. If you go into an art shop today and you want to buy a canvas, it's still measured in inches. So to me, it just makes sense. So I'm going to convert my 4 centimeters becomes 4 inches, and my 18 centimeters becomes 18 inches, and my 28 centimeters becomes 28 inches. So now we'll go over and I'll show you how I cut my canvas. I use a poly cotton canvas, a 70-30 blend. It's a lovely medium weight and a lovely smooth surface. And so what I've done is I've got this off a roll of canvas, and I like my canvas to be off a rolled, so I'm not confined to a pre-stretched canvas that you buy from an art shop. And so what I do is I cut off a length of canvas. I then measure out. I make sure I already know that I've gone from my measurements, so I know that my measurements are 28 inches and 18 inches. So I've measured that out. But what I'm also going to do is I'm going to allow a 2.5 inch border. So what I do is measure the 2.5 inch border out and cut that canvas to size. Now the reason I need this 2.5 inch border is because I'm using canvas off a roll, and in order to frame the canvas off a roll, what I have to do is I have to allow an area for the canvas to be stretched over a stretcher frame so that the framer can actually present my work. So again, I allow 2.5 inches. I've left that 2.5 inch border on all 4 sides. The next thing I do is I tack it down to the board with some staples. When I do a smaller piece, I don't usually tack it with staples. I just use masking tape to do this. But in this case, it's a little bit larger, so I'm going to use my staples. The staple gun that I use is a stationary one rather than a heavy duty one. And the staples are quite small, so I don't want it to wreck my canvas. All right, now that I've stapled it on, that canvas is not going to move anywhere, and it keeps it nice and tight for me. It's lovely and taut. And I've tacked it to a 6mm backing board, and it's just 6mm MDF board. It's a nice weight that will support my canvas. I like to paint on a lovely hard surface. I don't like the spring of a normal canvas. I really like this lovely hard surface. So now we're ready to draw.